All right, my friends, welcome back to Salt City Counseling. Once again, my name is Scott. If you're new here, I'm a licensed therapist here in the beautiful state of Utah. This video is going to be about borderline personality disorder, BPD is what I like to call it. And in this video, I'm going to kind of approach maybe a difficult question. Can they help themselves? Can they stop or manage their own behavior? Can they help their own behavior? Yes and no. It gets really, really complicated. I'm going to approach BPD from the approach of a therapy model called Internal Family Systems, or IFS. I've made content about this before. The more that I study IFS, the more I'm absolutely convinced that there's a strong link between this approach to human psychology and things like BPD. And because for years I've been talking about how BPD has a mind or a psyche that is in pieces, like it's in fragments. And when I've talked to them about it, and I've approached them about it in this context, like being shattered or broken into pieces, they have often not universally, but often very strongly agreed with me that yes, they just feel like they're broken and shattered into pieces. And they're trying to gather those pieces back up and trying to put them all back together. Their way of going about it doesn't work. Has not been effective for them. And I want to approach the disorder and try and help people understand this disorder in the context of being broken into pieces and in regards to internal family systems, because I really believe that this approach, the IFS approach, is going to help provide people, regardless of their position, whether the person has BPD themselves or it's somebody in their life or as a practitioner, a clinician. I believe the internal family systems approach helps us understand very much what is happening with the disorder. I believe it provides an excellent explanation and an excellent perspective on this disorder and what is actually happening, what is actually going on. The theory is basically that every person is broken into pieces or has a lot of pieces or fragments. For years I've been calling them fragments. Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, he basically called them complexes. That was his term, was complexes. And so you'll hear these terms used interchangeably, whether I use the term fragments or parts. The word parts comes from internal family systems. That's the word they use, or pieces or complexes. All those terms are basically interchangeable. The theory is basically this, that these parts or pieces or fragments of you, in a sense, have their own thoughts, desires, approach to life, that they're almost their own separate entity within you. And a lot of them are acting as protectors. They're trying to protect you from additional harm or additional trauma. And in the case of BPD, it's like those parts are far more pronounced. They have a lot more effect or power over the individual. That's why it appears as though we see them at one point, they seem like one person, and the next day they're a different person. And one day they're triggered by something, and the next day they're just not triggered by something. And this is why the behavior just seems so perplexing and so confusing, is because different parts are activated at different intervals or in the driver's seat. It's almost like, and people will say, why are they such effective liars? It's really kind of a case of like the left hand doesn't see what the right hand is doing, right? Even though you see one physical body, it's almost like one of those parts or one of those fragments has done something. And then later that day or the next day, a different part or fragment is in the driver's seat. And that part or fragment is there's no ego strength. And so it is not identifying that they have conducted that particular behavior like that was somebody else. This is often why they seem to be so angry and so taken aback, like you're accusing them. And what a liar you are that they have done, that you're accusing them of doing this, is that they are dissociated from their own behaviors, right? And it seems like the more pronounced these pieces or fragments become, the greater the mental health issues, the greater the dysfunction. We often talk about, for example, the difference between a high functioning versus low functioning borderline. The higher functioning don't have this dynamic going on to such an effect as someone who is low functioning. Those pieces or fragments are extremely strong-willed, work independently. The high functioning BPD, not so much, that those pieces are maybe a little bit more integrated, right? Or at least to a certain degree. Now, to me, and I've been saying for years, I believe that that a personality disorder is just a different version or a less extreme version of DID or dissociative identity disorder, or what used to be called multiple personality disorder. When those pieces or fragments become so pronounced, they just take on different identities. They take on different names. They take on totally different identities. And when they're in the driver's seat, then suddenly they are that person. They take on a different name. They take on a different persona, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so the question comes up: can those with a personality disorder control themselves? Or can they help themselves? Well, sort of yes and no, right? The no in the sense that if they're not aware of this dynamic and they refuse to face it or take it on or identify with it or recognize like, hey, I have somehow managed to do these things, that's on me. And I've been saying for a long time now, one of the keys for them to get better is to take accountability and responsibility for their actions. And for that, if they own up to it, like, hey, I don't necessarily remember making that decision, but I recognize that was me, and I need to work on having more self-control. That much personal responsibility is going to get them a lot further than many other things. The reason why they don't do that is because there's a part of them, one of those fragments, insists on them as though we cannot do that because that will just equate to more pain, more betrayal, more abandonment, etc., when we have to protect ourselves, and therefore we have to basically live in denial and deny that, no, that was not us. We didn't do that. Stop accusing me. And that's why they're defensive. These parts or these fragments are trying to protect them. So unless they kind of own up to, yes, this person, this avatar or whatever did that behavior, then no, it would seem that they don't seem to have much control because they're dissociated from a lot of their behaviors. They don't associate, that was me. It seems to them, well, that was somebody else. That wasn't me that did that, right? And so that's where it gets really, really tricky. But again, what's fascinating is that, again, everybody has this internal family, so to speak, or these different parts of these different fragments. And the more pronounced those individual pieces or parts or fragments are, the higher the level of dysfunction, or the higher level of mental illness is involved here. And so, again, the idea is that they need to take personal responsibility. They need to take accountability. That's going to be one of the solutions. They have to take accountability and responsibility for their own actions. That's how they then the dissociation dries up, right? And that's what they need, though they may not necessarily realize it. But anyways, I was having some of these aha moments and insights about BPD, and I thought it would be interesting to share them because I know a lot of you are here kind of for that content. So if you find that interesting, you have questions or comments, leave them below. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Help me grow my channel. If you like this content and you want to keep it going, please go hit the tip jar. That will be in the description below. If you have questions, I love viewer questions. So leave them in the comment section below, or you can email me as well. That will also be in the description below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.